You know, it's honestly interesting to look at where you season 3 is and where the show started back in season 1 because personally I feel like this show when it first came out was not only felt like a guilty pleasure, which it still sort of does, but it also felt very style over substance. I don't know how much of that is legitimate. It sort of seems like now they planted a lot of stuff with certain characters that was set to pay off later if they got continually renewed, which there are no guarantees anymore with Netflix. You never know because at any moment show could get canceled. They could still cancel you. It got renewed for season 4, but hopefully that actually comes up. But it is interesting looking back at season 1. Feel like a lot of the dialogue was really bad in the early version of this show.
I wolf you.
I wolf you too.
And it seems, at least in season 3, like they've really gone out of their way to improve a lot of that stuff and try to genuinely make the show subjectively, objectively. I always forget. They want to make it actually good. They actually want the show to be a little bit less cringy in terms of the dialogue than it was earlier on. They also want to change Joe, or at least get him away from the character he was earlier on. Because season 3, the whole point they keep trying to make, this is a different Joe. That's the point Joe keeps trying to make. This is not the same guy who would just, randomly murder people as he is known to do. He's changed. He's got a family now. Joe is a family man. And he's so desperately. And that's why I love the voiceovers in this show, because Joe is so desperate to just be a good person. And he still thinks of himself as being a good person, which again, there's a lot of deeper psychological stuff with this character. But one of the best parts of season 3 is how he spends the entire time trying to convince himself and us that he is a good person. He is not the guy he was all those seasons ago. Spoilers, massive spoilers. There are going to be spoilers all over the video. So just, if you haven't seen the first 2 seasons or this season, go watch them and then come back here. At the end of season 2, find out that Love is actually just as crazy, if not crazier than Joe, which is one of the best twists that I have seen in a show in recent memory, because I didn't see it coming at all. And in season 3, Love, you could almost argue that season 3 of the show is about her. That in season 3, she's the central character. She just tries everything she can to, in her ideas, in her mentality, she's trying what she can do to fix a marriage that she's afraid of losing, fixing her family, her and Joe and the baby. It's a really interesting examination of her character. And I think that's what I wanted to dive into more with season 3 of You, is because in the earlier seasons, I feel like we didn't get a lot of these like borderline character studies. In this season, the show is really examining who these people really are and whether or not they're able to confront who they really are, or whether they just keep allowing outside sources to give them the leeway to never have to actually acknowledge what's wrong with them, never acknowledge their own flaws. There's a lot of great character development over the course of season 3. I want to talk about a few high points. I think one of the best high points of the show is the first 2 episodes of season 3 and the last 2 episodes of season 3, which I think maybe a little bit gives away my low point. But first 2 episodes are great because they go to classic Joe, sees a girl through the fence. That's the new woman he's obsessed with. Last 2 episodes are basically as crazy as the end of season 2, which had a phenomenal ending, and they're incredibly tense, and there's a lot of Mr. and Mrs. Smith vibes between Love and Joe, but also they're a perfect match, but then they each, it's, the end of season 3 is wild. It's absolutely wild. Now, that being said, low point, I think, is that the season, in terms of the flow, feels a little bit like a mixed bag. It feels like it could have been shorter. Maybe it could have been 8 episodes. I don't know if 10 was a mandate or if they felt like there was enough material for 10 episodes. I'm not entirely sure there was. It does feel like it drags a bit in the middle after the insane beginning and insane end to the show. And it's not always bad because a lot of that is for character development, which is super important, especially in this season, and it's done really well. But I think they do spend a little too much time on it, especially the fact that we have known Joe for now 3 seasons, and we knew Love. Well, we sort of knew her, but like we get to know her a lot more in season 3, but we did know her for almost all of season 2 as well. So there are points in the season where it feels like not too much is happening. I don't want to quite say filler, but it seems like they could have probably paced things a little bit better in terms of something crazy happening. Usually this is one of those shows, last 5 minutes, something insane happens. So, the ending of season 3. Full spoilers ahead. Love dies. Joe kills Love. She tried to paralyze him with a parasitic she was growing in the garden. And Joe, this is what was interesting. These two characters, which literally act on a whim seemingly all the time. So many of their decisions are based purely on emotion. They were like, everybody was 2 steps ahead of everyone else, and she grew the pet, but then he had an antidote that Joe was a fucking scientist all of a sudden. And he figured out an antidote, and anyway, he kills her. She dies. That's the end of Love. Now, I heard in the books, it's actually the other way around. Love kills Joe. Penn Badgley came out. He said, doesn't think that's how Joe's story should end. He doesn't think that a woman should have to finish this guy off for good. I think we all agree that Joe needs to die at the end of this season. Kind of like a Walter White situation, right? It's like you might be rooting for him, but he's still a horrible person that should probably die in the show. But somehow, I don't know exactly how it's going to happen, but it didn't happen here. And I'm kind of torn because I think that Victoria, that's her real name. I think that Love was a fantastic character in the show. You could almost probably make the argument that she was a more intriguing character than Joe. And Joe is pretty screwed up in the head, but Love was Shakespearean, like tragic in the sense that, like, I guess she deserved what happened to her because she did a lot of stuff wrong. So we're trying to glorify Love and everything she did, but it's complicated. I guess that's why I like the show. The fact that they even make you think about stuff like this, which I didn't really think about much in the earlier seasons. So they've done a good job there. Unfortunately, they did such a good job with Love's character that it sort of feels like you're not going to be able to do that again. And if you do, people are going to compare that new woman or character to Love. So again, to go back to Breaking Bad, this is almost like the Gus Fring versus Walter White. It's like he's the one you remember, even though the show went on for like 2 more seasons. So, I mean, they had more villains, but like Gus was the guy. So it kind of feels like Victoria was the big boss. And now that she's gone, and Penn even said this in an interview, was like future seasons, people are going to be like, oh, you should have never killed off Love. Like, she was the best character on the show. I mean, they wouldn't necessarily be wrong. I think at this point, I trust the writers have some idea what they're doing. And they got renewed for season 4. So they must have had some reason to do this and some idea where they wanted to go with this. But I don't know. I think getting into season 4 a little bit, here is something I worry about with the show. It very much feels like, and this is not a bad thing necessarily, but it feels like a show like this could go on forever. It kind of feels like every season could realistically be Joe doing his usual, but it's always been you. And then finding a new girl and then ruining her life and probably ending up killing her too. Not funny, all right? Serious stuff. It's It's like a vicious cycle with this guy, which is why he needs to die. Kind of feels like a show like this has to keep upping the ante. So Love was such a great character, and it created a great dynamic with Joe. I don't know how you top it, and you kind of have to because the show's still going. So, but then it's also gonna be kind of hard to, maybe she has a twin sister. They do like a soap opera thing where it's like Love's evil twin. I don't know what they're gonna do. I think that a show like this has a finite amount of time before the premise starts to get too repetitive, right? Where it's like Joe meets a girl, inevitably a bunch of crazy stuff happens. He almost dies, but he doesn't, gets out of it because he's the protagonist. And then the person dies, and then the next season. And then it just keeps going like that. Maybe you could do like 5 seasons, but I think at a certain point people will get bored with the premise. And you can only make a show like this so crazy before it becomes even more unbelievable. So I think there's a little bit of worry there, but 3 seasons in, I think it's a good show. Like, I think it's actually a genuinely good show. I think it's kind of gone, like, there's still some of that guilty pleasure there, but I think the show is genuinely entertaining, and I think it's well written, and it's incredibly well acted, especially in season 3. Some great standout scenes and performances. Victoria Pedretti, I think is her name. Wow, this woman is so good. I'm looking forward to the 4th season. I want to see what they do with the show. And hey, maybe Love's not really dead.